Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully, people will trickle in as we continue. So, just want to say good evening. My name is Pastor L.T. Yimbata, and I am the pastor of Flemington Baptist Church. I do have a little something going on this evening, so forgive me if my voice gives out tonight. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Our church is in a season of a renewed understanding of our identity as a church, as well as God's calling for our church's presence in the community around us. And we have been blessed with a grant from Leadership Education at Duke Divinity. And this grant will help us to deepen our explorations through a project we have titled Aesthetic Faith Encountering God Through Immersive Experiences. And this project is a congregation wide exploration of immersive art, creating art and facilitating creative experiences that foster a deeper sense of connection to God, self, and neighbor within our church and the surrounding community. And so we desire to be a place of belonging for folks, for all people. And so we know that many of our neighbors, our friends, and loved ones may consider themselves spiritual but not religious. And to better serve and connect with this growing population of individuals, we've invited the incomparable Reverend Dr. Linda Mercadante, author of Belief Beyond Borders. And I experienced Dr. Linda at the Space for Grace conference of the American Baptist Home Mission Societies last September. And if you haven't attended Space for Grace, I highly encourage it. Her talk was everything I didn't know I needed. And so I knew that I wanted to bring her to our community, and her work is too much of a good thing to keep to ourselves. And so we want to encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about aesthetic faith, you can visit our website at flemingtonbaptist.org to check it out. It is under the Fresh Expressions tab. But I want to just read Dr. Linda's bio, and then I'm going to turn it over to my ministry colleague, Carmel Bojalin, who will pray, and then we'll turn it right over to Dr. Linda. So Dr. Linda is a distinguished research professor, emerita MTSO, founder of healthybeliefs.org, and she is also an ordained Presbyterian minister. She specializes in theology and culture, lectures internationally, has won many grants for her research, and is the author of 5 books and hundreds of articles. Hundreds. Her most recent, Belief Without Borders Inside the Minds of the Spiritual But Not Religious, also known as SBNR, has become an academic bestseller. She has been featured in the New York Times, NBC's The Today Show, NPR, and many other media outlets. As a former SBNR herself, she tells about this journey in Bloomfield Avenue, a Jewish Catholic Jersey girl's spiritual journey. And she can be contacted at healthybeliefs.org. We're so excited to have you, Dr. Linda, and Carmel will pray us in.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lathelma, and thank you so much, Dr. Linda, for being with us. Friends, let us join together in prayer. Lord God, we thank you that you promise to be with us always. Thank you that your presence is with us right now. Today, we give you our hearts, our minds, and our lives. Come and speak your words of life into our being. Come speak your words of life into our minds. Bless Dr. Linda, and through her teaching, we pray that you would deepen our comprehension, broaden our thinking, and transform our understanding of what we are about to learn. For you are our wise counselor, our perfect teacher, and our faithful friend. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Dr. Linda, I pass it to you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I see there's a nice group here, although I don't see all your faces. But anyway, I'm really pleased to be here. Reverend Lathelma told me about your church, about the grant, and she was very excited about bringing this information about spiritual but not religious to people there. And by the way, I am a Jersey girl, although I live in Ohio now, and I kind of miss Jersey. But I lived in Hopewell, and he used to come to Flemington all the time. I went to Princeton for my PhD, and believe it or not, I was born in Newark, and that's where I grew up. So anyway, What I want to do today is show you do some slides, and stick with me because I'm going to narrate. I'm going to talk about what you're seeing. And what I want to do is help you understand who spiritual but not religious people are, what they're hoping for, that they have spiritual needs, obviously, because we all do. And what can we do to make life better for people that are spiritual but not religious, and help them with their spiritual needs without making it seem like the church is trying to, grab them. Okay. That's the most important thing. And let me go to the slideshow now, and stick with me. I'll be stopping here and there and asking some questions that feel free to just jump in, unmute yourself, say what you want to say, and then we'll move on. We probably won't have a lot of time for that kind of interchange because I want to save time at the end so that we can have a little question and answer period and discussion. So let me share my screen with you, and we'll get going. Oh boy. Okay, let me go into slideshow mode. I'm sure you've all done this. Okay. Well, sorry, it's technology. Well, as I was telling the Reverend, my computer does not cooperate with me. Okay. If you can't see this, what we'll do is we'll switch over to the Reverend and she can show my slides. Reverend, do you think that's a good idea, or do you want to stick with it this way?
I think you're fine. We could just move it over just a little bit because your title,
I
um,
know.
the
I don't think
bottom,
it's right.
go down to the bottom and just move it up back a
Yeah,
little.
right.
Okay.
There.
There you
Sorry
go.
about that.
Perfect.
Okay. Missing the mark. That's what I call it, because I think we're like ships passing in the night. And having been a spiritual but not religious person myself, I really am aware that people misrepresent people that are spiritual but not religious, and not only misrepresent them, but sometimes even judge them. So we want to get away from that. But let me move on here. Okay, so I see my computer doesn't want to do slideshow mode, so hopefully that's okay. What do we think about spiritual but not religious people? What do they believe? This is essential. It isn't that everything's about belief, obviously not. But what people believe when they're spiritual but not religious is really important to understand, or else, like I said, we're ships passing in the night. What are their spiritual struggles? Now, we all have spiritual struggles, but I think the ones that spiritual but not religious people have are kind of unique. What image have we? When I say we, I mean the church, religion. What image has religion presented to people that maybe made them not want to go? Okay, that's really important. And then what can we do now? First of all, it's important to understand that there's a lot of people that are either called nuns, N-O-N-E-S. They don't call themselves that because that's kind of offensive. But what it means is that they don't, when they are presented with a survey and asked what religion they are, they check none. Okay, so look at this. The growth is amazing. This started really around the 1990s, and this is odd, but it started almost the same time as the rise of evangelicalism, and at the same time as the rise of the addiction recovery movement in the 90s. Can you explain that? Like, how did all that happen at the same time? The 90s was a really busy time. And this graph starts in, and Pew is a wonderful research center. This one starts in 2007, but the growth is obvious no matter what. Some people think, oh, the whole country's becoming Muslim or Buddhist. It's really not. Other religions have grown a little bit, and they're here, of course, and that's wonderful, but it isn't really a huge surge in other religions. What the huge surge is people that are having no religion. That's a surge. And this, if we could chart this out a couple more years, you would see that it's over 30% now. And Christianity, which in 2007 had 78% of Americans, in 21 had only 63% in the 50s, 95%, 90 something percent said they were organized, they were part of organized religion, and a lot of them were Protestant, and many were Catholic, and some were Jewish, and they were religious. They said they were religious. Okay, so from 90% in the 50s, 1950s, down to 78%, which is a huge drop. Okay, in 2007, down to 63%. And today, and this is crazy because it's so recent, today it's under 50%. Okay, Protestants alone make up under 50% of Americans, and Catholics are low too. Everybody is losing ground. Organized religion is in decline. It's important to realize that. It doesn't mean it has to be, and it doesn't mean it'll stay like that. But unless we wrap our minds around this and really think about it and say, what have we done something wrong? What's going on here? We better, otherwise we're just sticking our heads in the sand. And I'm talking about religion. Okay, so why should you care? You know, why should I care? Well, I care because I was a spiritual but not religious person. I was raised without organized religion. I had a Jewish mother and a Catholic father. Both were immigrants to this country. And because their religions told them they shouldn't get married, they just said, well, then we don't need religion. And they didn't give me any religion. But a lot of people around me had religion, unlike today. And I had these spiritual yearnings that I couldn't explain. So I kind of went on a search. I also became an atheist for a while. And so I care because I know how it feels to be judged for not having religion. And I know how it feels to be judged to be from immigrant roots. And I know how it feels to be judged to be a Catholic by Protestants. And, you know, it's not okay. I did have a conversion experience in my 20s, and I realized I had been spiritually hungry for a very long time, and I was searching without realizing it. And I tried everything: yoga, Buddhism. I was a member of an ashram. I did mindfulness and meditation. I did it all. I tried and tried and tried. And finally, I did find what I was looking for, or else God found what God was looking for, which I guess was me, among so many others. So is it a concern for everybody else, not just me? Yes. For those of you who raised your kids in the church like I did, which didn't, you know, work out actually, although he had a great experience, but he still doesn't go, right? Well, I'm not unique. Nearly 6 in 10 young people who grow up in Christian churches end up walking away. This is extremely important. 59%, look at that. 59% of young people, you might have, sometimes I speak to churches and they go, what did we do wrong? Well, we took them to Sunday school. They went to youth camp. They went on mission trips. They had a good experience. Nobody hurt them. They liked it. Everything was fine. They loved going to church. What happened? They stopped going. How do we explain this? That's what we want to look at. And just to relieve the guilt of those of you who may have done this very thing, raised your kids in the church, I want to say that this change is like a train roaring down the tracks. And, you know, Americans, we think we're so unique, but in a lot of ways, we're really not. We kind of go with the crowd. And that's where the crowd's going. There will still be religion, and there will still be Christianity, and there will still be other religions and Judaism and all. But unless we figure out how to change the impression that the church is making, it's going to get smaller. And when you think about all the spiritual and social capital that religion provides, I know there's bad things that religion does. I know it, but it also does a lot of really good things. And unless we figure out how to return to our roots, this decline will continue. And so that's kind of my mission, to let people rethink what it means to be church and to be community. Okay, so as I said, I was spiritual but not religious, and I wrote a book. So if you want to, this is a spiritual memoir. You can go and you can get one on Kindle. You can buy it used, like it'll be hardly any money at all. And you know, just make a note of this. And you can get this book if you want to know the whole story of my journey. Not that my journey is so special, but it does give you an example of what it means when somebody has been spiritual but not religious, and then suddenly has a change of heart. And that's what my book's about. I sometimes I think, what in the world? How did I end up? I'm a Jersey girl from immigrant parents, and I ended up in Ohio teaching in a United Methodist seminary. Sometimes I'd wake up and go, how did this happen? Wow, this is weird. And it was all because God found me. Simple answer. So among my other books that I wrote, I decided to write about spiritual but not religious people. And what I did was I decided to interview them. And fortunately, I was able to get a sabbatical and a grant. It was wonderful. It really, really was blessed by that. And I had some time. So I was able to travel the entire country and also somewhat overseas and in Canada, and interview people that said they were spiritual but not religious. I spoke with hundreds. I went everywhere to find them. It was easy to find them. It was so easy. If I went into let's say a bookstore or a yoga studio or wherever, and I, enjoy all that. And people would say, hey, who are you? And what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing a book on people that are spiritual but not religious. And I kid you not, every time I said this, people would go like this, that's me, that's me. It was easy to find people to interview. It's such a common denominator. It's such a common label. Now, not everybody calls themselves that, but a lot of people do. And you might ask yourself, why is that a popular title? Well, let's think about that as we go forward. Why do they say they're spiritual but not religious? Think now to yourself, why do you think they say that? I'm going to ask you in a minute what you think about spiritual but not religious people. But I'll give you a thumbnail sketch of what they say is their reason for calling themselves spiritual but not religious. It's not that they're lazy on Sunday morning, they want to sleep. No, they get up to go hiking, they're up, or go for brunch. That's not it. It's not that they're anarchists and radicals and all that. I didn't find that. They're not mentally ill, thank goodness. It's a diverse group, and it's really not a group as in we meet together and we're a group. It's so common in our society that there's only one thing that absolutely holds them together. One is some of their beliefs, and I'm going to go through this, that they reject, and also the generic explanation for why they use this term. And here it is. They say that SBNR say they see religion, and I'm talking that religious people also often call themselves spiritual but not religious. When I'd go into churches, people would come up and say, interview me. I'm spiritual but not religious. I go, well, what? Yeah, what? You're sitting here every Sunday in a United Methodist church or a Presbyterian church. How can you say that? I go, no, really, I am. Okay, and here's what everybody said. They said religion was institutional, it was dogmatic, it was exterior, it was unessential. Some people said it was boring. And then spirituality, what did they mean by that? They said it's personal, it's private, it's open, it's individualistic, and it's core. It's in my heart, it's core. So actually, they found this to be a more righteous or praiseworthy way to identify yourself, saying you're spiritual but not religious. Think about that. And I'm going to ask you in a minute what we think about people that say this. Technology. Okay. Now, what I want to say here is it's kind of a false dichotomy, kind of not really. That doesn't really work. It's okay that people say it. I understand what they're trying to say. But if you just look at definitions, or if you just look at what religion's always meant, religion and spirituality are together. They're coterminous. They are embedded inside each other. Because really, spirituality is all the beliefs and activities by which individuals attempt to relate their lives to God or to a divine being or some other conception of transcendent reality. That's a quote from Robert Wuthnow, who's a very prominent sociologist of religion. Religion and spirituality are embedded in each other. And actually, people that say they're spiritual but not religious often do things that other people might call religious, but just not within organized religion. Okay, so let me ask you this. What do you think about spiritual but not religious people? I've given you the real common generic definition, but what do you think? Anybody wants to jump in and, you can just think about it, or you can say some things. I can't see your faces right now, but Lethelma, the Reverend, can moderate this. So let's just take a minute. Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk after the slideshow. It's not that long. Anybody want to jump in? I see there's some chat going on here.
That's just me. I was just informing people that
Okay.
type in the chat, or you can use your raise hand icon and we can.
Yeah, raised hand is nice, because then you can call on them, right, Reverend?
I can unmute.
I can't see it actually
So the
here.
question is, what do we think about people who identify as spiritual but not really?
Yeah.
Someone wrote in the chat, Reverend Jonathan said, I believe I'm guilty of too often and too quickly assuming that SBNR folks have been harmed by the church.
Yes, yes, yes. Excellent. That's what people within the church often say. Look how we treated them. Of course they left. But people, but what else do you think? I said people think they're lazy. Oh, they don't want to get up Sunday morning. Yeah, but they're getting up for other reasons. So that's not a very good reason. That's not a good explanation. I mean,
we have somebody.
Everyone. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people feel like what they see in the news about Christians protesting, at soldier funerals and things like that gives a very bad impression of,
right.
Religion. And so they don't want any part of that.
That's right. That's really common. It's not all about politics that people reject organized religion, but there's definitely an element of that. Definitely. Anybody else? You can do a chat and the Reverend will read it, or you can go ahead and speak up.
We have another one, Leslie.
It's Clay.
Clay.
This is Clay. I have a question. Just food for thought. How do you propose, because I would like to hear your comments, how do you propose that we approach those who, let's say, have been dismayed with the current, just like I am, with the behavior of the current Christian church, and how do we as Christians circumvent that, right? Like how do we fight against our own people, if you will? And I'm sorry, I'm coming into this late, so forgive me if I miss it. My wife is pointing out to me that that's the whole discussion of this talk. So
Oh,
no,
can you hang on to that question? Or
sure.
Reverend maybe could take a note on that, because
I got it.
That's a really good one to come back to.
I apologize. Yes, thank you.
No, it's fine. No problem. That's okay.
Can you type it into the Q&A box just so it can stay there, and then
then we'll go back to it.
Got it.
I want to give you some basic information and then we'll take the harder stuff, but all right, well, let me move on here. And well, that way we have time for Q&A. Okay, now my research actually disproved a lot of the stereotypes that many people hold. Maybe nobody in this webinar, but many people feel that, look what we did to hurt them, and that's called religious distress. I didn't hear, and remember, I talked to hundreds, hundreds, and I wrote my book and I quoted them a lot they were anonymous, but I quoted them. Okay, I heard very few stories of religious distress, meaning they got hurt by the church. I mean, they didn't agree with a lot, maybe, or at least they didn't agree with just one thing. They often felt that if they didn't agree with every single thing, they were honor bound to leave. And I wasn't preaching or lecturing when I interviewed, but if I could have spoken to them about it, and I tried not to bring my own opinion, I would have said, not everybody in the pews think the same way. In fact, probably hardly anybody in the pews thinks exactly the same way. That's common. And so if you leave just because of one disagreement, there's a lot of disagreements sitting there that you don't know about. Okay, was it that the church was unfriendly? No, didn't hear very many complaints about religious community. In fact, a lot of people were missing the potlucks, because where else do you find diverse groups of people who bring really great food together and eat it and have fun? Where do you do that anymore? And then it's multi-generational, which is really unusual today, but people miss that. So I didn't hear people saying it was unfriendly. I didn't find spiritual but not religious people to be highly narcissistic or afraid of commitment. They were just like, we were like everybody else. They weren't any more self-centered than anybody else. And they were married, had kids, had jobs. There was no commitment phobia there. They certainly weren't unhinged. I didn't find them lazy, and I didn't find them terribly unhappy either. And finally, people would say, well, they don't like belief. They just want to have experience and, go hiking and have feel-good moments. Well, no, they weren't against belief. As you'll see, they had some very clear-cut beliefs. So actually, their quarrels were often about belief. So I don't think we have time to go into a lot of this, but let me just show you some of the bumper stickers that I collected that tell you some of the things that they stuck on their cars, if they stuck that on their cars, that they objected to. Look at this one. Can you read those? And they actually kind of come together. Each set of bumper stickers comes together. And I don't know if you can figure out where the togetherness is here, but there are assumptions here that that religious people are rigid, dogmatic, don't think, are anti-science, are terrorists against heretics, and then that if you say I've been practicing witchcraft and becoming a lesbian, that the people will freak out. So that's one assumption about the church. Here's another set of assumptions. Hate. They think the church is all about hate. Your followers are bad. God protect me from your followers. And then that they're not about freedom, and they're not about religious freedom, and that Christians are not like Christ. Well, yeah, you might say that sometimes. And then that religion brought in the dark ages. See that? See these bumper stickers? I hope you're looking at those, and they might be funny, but they also might be telling something important. And then many people that are spiritual but not religious say they find spirituality in nature. So God is nature. Of course, there's a word for that, pantheism, and it is different than theism, but a lot of people feel that that's where they appreciate spirituality. Everything is connected. Here's something you might hear at an AA meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous. Religion is for people afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for those who have been there. So another assumption is that people that in organized religion are a little nutty and don't appreciate nature, or that everything's connected and are rigid again. Okay, here's another set. I bet you've seen these. Tolerance, peace, coexistence, compassion, teach. In other words, they say the best part of all religions is that they have these, they teach peace, they teach tolerance. And why say your religion's better than somebody else's when they all, at their best, teach these things? We only got a couple more. Now here people are trying to say that Christians in particular have a male God. By the way, God doesn't have maleness, femaleness, or any of that, because God's a spirit. But at any rate, my goddess gave birth to your God. We all come from the goddess. Back off, I'm a goddess. The goddess is alive. So that's a protest against the male, what they think Christians believe, which is that God's a male. People say God is father, but God could also be mother. And that's called anthropomorphizing anyway, because God isn't any of those things, but it's hard for humans to think about anything without using human categories. And finally, silly ones like, if you're born again, do you have two belly buttons? Born okay the first time, what's that a protest against? Original sin, non-judgment day is near. So these are core things they think is core to religion, but in fact, organized religion, and in particular Christianity, in some places, yes, it's this rigid. Yes, it teaches hate. Yes, sometimes yes, but not generally, and not historically, and not traditionally. There's a lot more, there's a bad side, but there's a lot more diversity. And the good side is being ignored. And you have to ask yourself why. Well, let's move on. Oh, my thing is having a problem. Looks like my mouse is having a problem. Okay. Okay, so what don't they believe? What do they object to? They object to exclusivism. That's my way or the highway. You know, it's you come with us and you're saved, be outside of us, you're not saved. They object to anybody who says there's absolute truth. They say, no, it's my truth, your truth. They object to a personal, intentional, involved God. They might believe in creativity or the spirit or the universe or a higher power, but not a personal God. They really hated the word sin. They did not like the concept of heaven and hell. And they thought that community was good for spiritual growth, but you could get there without community. I think my mouse is dying. Okay, so what are their beliefs? Well, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but still. They have certain beliefs about transcendence. Transcendence is what's beyond us, what's beyond the earth. And Chris have historically said that God is transcendent and immanent. Immanent meaning here with us, transcendent meaning bigger than us, greater than us. What's their view of human nature? We're going to go through that. What's their view of community and life after death? Now, there's probably people in the audience right now that say, yeah, I believe all that. That's how I feel too, because I find a lot of people within churches have the same beliefs and could rightly call themselves spiritual, but not religious. So when we get further down, I'm going to say, why did this happen? What kind of preaching have they heard? Was it good preaching? Let's think about that. Okay, so first of all, what about transcendence and what Christians would call God, or any religion, other religions would call God, especially the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The people I spoke to felt that transcendence, higher power, universe was impersonal. Didn't know you personally, didn't have a special relationship with you. You couldn't pray to it. You could plug into it and get energy, but it wasn't personal to you. So that's in fact, hardly anybody that I interviewed, maybe it was zero, used the word God, except in negative, for a negative reason. So why do you think people would think God was bad, that they couldn't use the word? That's important. We need to look into that. What about human nature? Well, most people felt that everybody's born good. In fact, every single person said we're all born good. Well, Christianity teaches that too, that God created us good. But of course, Christianity goes on to explain, and so does Judaism and so does Islam, why then do we do bad things? Well, for the SBNRs, we do bad things because we're psychologically harmed, we are abused, we're mentally ill, we have bad brain chemistry. So it was always, there was this worldly reason, which obviously is often the case. But there's more to it from a Christian perspective. What about community? Most of the people I spoke to liked the idea of community, would have liked community, but kept wanting a community where everyone agreed with them, and yet everyone was free to express their own views. And so they never found the right one. And they were also often looking for a perfect community, which, as everybody knows, is just about impossible to find. And then finally, life after death. Pretty much everybody, well, okay, a small percentage believed in what I call the recycling theory. You go in the ground, grass comes up, that's it. But most of them believed there is life after death. They didn't like heaven and hell, those ideas. Many believed in reincarnation, felt that was more fair. But the version of reincarnation wasn't a religious one. In other words, it wasn't a Hindu or a Buddhist, which is very legitimate in their traditions, reincarnation. It's not a Christian view, by the way, but they felt that if they would go on to bigger and better things and keep coming back, was kind of a constant process. There wasn't a terminal point, and there wasn't, a meeting with God that ended everything, which in Hinduism and Buddhism, there is an end point. Okay. So those were their views, but surveys have found that even changing your views to these seemingly more open views does not improve people's spirituality. And I think that's very important. A lot of millennials, excuse me, for instance, are either non-NONE or spiritual but not religious. They certainly aren't very religious. But a survey has shown that 75% say they lack meaning and purpose in life. That is a spiritual crisis. And look at the rising rates of depression and suicide and mental health issues. Actually, people are looking everywhere for spiritual healing or centering and changing their beliefs to oppose what they think are Christian beliefs isn't working. It's not helping. You can take all the yoga in the world, and unfortunately, you may still not have what you need spiritually. So the real issue is that many people today, I mean, many, think about the crises we're having of violence, gun violence, depression, and suicide in young people and in all ages too. Many are spiritually hungry without realizing it. Look at the rampant loneliness. Of course, the pandemic made it worse. Search for meaning, difficulty with trust. A lot of SBNRs have trouble with trust, and a lot of people in this culture have trouble with trust, period. Many people feel they need to create their own identity. They don't feel that any longer that they're born with an identity. They need to make it happen, create it. There very few people have a shared narrative, that you agree on the meaning of life, the direction of life, the purpose, the endpoint. That seems to have gone away. And so what do people do? Sometimes they just make work their substitute, or family, or those are good things, but they're not going to solve the spiritual hunger. It's just not enough. That's why I ended up having a reckoning with God, not because I felt guilty and bad and all that. That wasn't it. It was because I was needy and hungry. And I wasn't a messed up person. I was a journalist. Things were going fine. But the real deep hunger was not, I was not finding the solution to it or the settledness to it. In all the many things I tried, and believe me, I tried a lot of things. So what's the quandary here? Well, if religion can fill spiritual needs, which it does, it can, why do SBNRs avoid it? And they especially avoid Christianity. What in the world is going on here? That's the question. Because religion was created, and humans, of course, are, part of the structure to fulfill spiritual needs. Okay, how come they're avoiding the very thing that is there to help? And again, I'm not minimizing the problems. Okay, anything that's capable of great good is equally capable of great evil. I know that. I've been involved in religion for quite a while. I know that firsthand. But that doesn't take away the fact that it is a place to find a reckoning with your higher power, with God, with the universe, and can fill your spiritual needs. Really. For me, I tried everything. There just wasn't anything else. I tried everything. Okay. Everything that wasn't going to, get me in serious trouble, that is. Okay, so here's what I want to say. Here's where I think the church has gone wrong. Okay, if God is presented as angry, inconsistent, and punishing, well, hey, an impersonal universal energy source seems way better, right? So what kind of God has the church presented? Sinners in the hands of an angry God, a God that'll smite you, or bless you and you never know which it's going to be. That is not a good image of God. And it's not true to God either. All right. If human nature is presented as mostly sinful, doomed without the church, and needing to earn grace, not free grace, but earn it, hey, a therapeutic approach focused on self-healing seems a whole lot better. And remember, I said that in with all these changes, people are still spiritually hungry. If community is presented, and I'm saying if the church has presented these things this way, if community is presented as an exclusive club, you're either in or out. If you're out, we judge you. If you're in, okay. Maybe we won't judge you, maybe we will, but if that's the message, and church is presented as only for good people, well, hey, that's not gonna, yeah, that can't be true, because people come looking for something. And if community is presented as inwardly focused, it's just for the believers, it's just for us, well, then choosing one's own circle without a long-term commitment seems way better. So yeah, that's another reason we have to think about what we've been not just teaching, but living, presenting in the church. And if afterlife is presented as only for a select few, that you could be chosen by an unpredictable God, God could choose you, God could not choose you, who knows? I don't know if I'm doing well enough to get chosen, if that's how you see God. And there's no second chances. Now, again, these are not good. This is not good theology. All right. I'm a theologian. All those things I just said, it's not good theology. It's bad theology. All right. Well, anyway, if that's how afterlife is presented, good luck and, hope you make it. Reincarnation sounds way better. An endless progression, bigger and better, onward and upward. That seems better, seems more fair. That's what I heard from my interviewees. Well, what we got to do, we have to reconsider our image here. What have we been teaching? What have we been showing? What kind of impression has the church made on people? And I'm not talking about some of the extremes. I'm talking about everyday churches. Okay. I'm not talking about highly politicized. They, of course, make a bad impression on a lot of people, but I'm talking about your everyday church on the corner. Okay. Okay. So if that's what we look like, what the church looks like, we got to rethink this. Okay. Now I'm almost done here and then we'll open it up. So how do we start? First of all, I highly urge you to be realistic. Don't expect that you're going to be just bringing them in droves to pump up your budget in the church. Not a good motivation, a terrible motivation. I know churches and denominations think in terms of numbers. I get that. Maybe we're hurting ministers by doing that in congregations, because that's not the point. And don't expect people, even if they hear you and they hear what you're saying, don't expect them to rush to church next Sunday. Just be realistic. There's a lot of bad impressions out there, and it's going to take a while to change that. Next point, ask and listen. Everybody I spoke to was literally grateful that I sat there for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, listening to them, listening to their life story, listening to their spiritual history, to their struggles. They don't feel heard. They don't feel people are listening to them. They feel people are judging them or dismissing them or ignoring them. Can you sit with your child who's spiritual but not religious, if someone is, or your neighbor, and simply listen to them? Try that. I had great results. And I wasn't out to convert people. I was out to learn from them. Okay. How about helping to identify people's spiritual struggles? I know people are busy today with work, trying to earn a living, multiple jobs. I get it. But if at bottom they feel empty, you may be able to help them identify those spiritual struggles, because without the diagnosis of the problem, the cure can't happen. If you go to a doctor and they can't figure out what's wrong with you, they can't really help you. You have to help people figure out what they're missing and help them figure out where they can find it. Now, be prepared to explain your own faith. Believe it or not, people are very interested in that. They can't understand why people go to church or are religious, and you're going to need to be thinking about that so you can help them. and you can tell your story. You should tell your story. Show why the gospel is good news. It's not good news because it's about heaven and hell. It's not good news because we sit together and we put money in a basket. It's not good news because we have a nice building and we need to keep it up. That's not good news. That's just business. It's good news because it's about God's love. It's good news because God's love is free. It's good news because God is reaching out for us at all times. People don't know that. They really don't know that. They think it's about judgment and ignorance and rigidity, all that. Act the way Jesus taught us. Jesus was not trying to gather people and have a budget and all that. I know this is life, and you need money and you need to keep the lights on. I get it, but he taught a completely different way to act. And I think that the way forward for being the church with people that are spiritual but not religious is compassion. Our culture is very short, very, very short on compassion. Now, compassion is active. It's not about pity. It's not about sympathy. It's not about, be warmed and be fed by now. It's about acting in ways that show you care. That's what people don't see very much in the church. It's there. It's part of the gospel. It's like it is the gospel, but they're not seeing it. So I want to end with this thought. A lot of Protestantism has focused on what do you believe in, right? What do you believe, right? What do you believe? Do you believe Jesus died for your sins? Do you believe you're going to go to heaven or not? What do you believe? Actually, we have overdone belief. It's important, as you can see, because people are rejecting organized religion because of the beliefs they think that organized religion has. But don't believing that Jesus died for your sins, that the church is placed to grow, that is not enough. You can believe in God, believe in God's love. That's okay. But what we really need to do is believe in and then act. Believe in God and then act. Not make belief or make church a test that you have to pass, that you believe in certain things. And I'm a theologian, so I think belief is great. But we've overdone it in some ways, and we've given an impression. So sorry if the slides aren't perfect and, it got covered up a little bit, but thank you very much for listening. And I really want to hear your questions. Here's my website in case you want to communicate with me. I have a contact form. I would love to come to your church or group of SBNRs and elaborate on all this. Just write to me at this website and fill out the contact form. I will answer you right away. It'll send me an email immediately. I'll write to you and, we can have a discussion. I can come, I can give you a presentation, whatever you need, because just like the Blues Brothers, I guess I'm on a mission from God, because my mission is, are we loving people that are spiritual but not religious, or are we alienating them? Are we showing compassion or are we showing judgment? We need to change the impression that the church gives. So let me stop sharing my screen and we can open it up for conversation. And we still have plenty of time. Okay, Lethelma, it's back in your court. You're in charge.
Yeah, so we can go back to the question that Clay asked, which, excuse me, which is, how do we as Christians stand up to other Christians who are giving us a bad name?
True. I mean, that's a huge need. I think that if we act this way, the impression that the highly politicized people are giving that are Christian is it's an impression that alienates people. But what about the impression you give if you stop worrying about politics and even belief and start acting like Jesus taught us? That's how I became impressed with the church. I wasn't prone to wanting to be religious, but when people acted in love to me, I sat up and noticed. I really did. Are we doing that? That's my answer. Anybody else? Oh, I can't read the whole thing. Want to read that?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, I can, if you want
Oh,
me
go
to
ahead.
jump in with them. Yeah, the question that I was thinking about was, I've known many millennials who may identify as Christian, but have adopted various aspects of other spiritual traditions to supplement their spiritual walk. And I was curious as you were speaking, if you have found there to be a relationship between those who may identify as spiritual but not religious, and those who just kind of combine various spiritual
Yeah.
religious expressions into their spiritual practice.
Right. I don't see a harm in combining other spiritual practices. What I don't really appreciate, and I have done a lot of yoga and mindfulness and meditation and all that, and that can be super helpful for your spirituality. But what I didn't really like is during the last part of the yoga class, you're in the Shavasana, you're in the pose where you're lying there. It's restful, that's good. But then you're being told certain things that sometimes was not really in accord with my faith, and I'd rather just appreciate the feelings of it rather than trying to teach me something like that might say like all your answers are inside you, and it's your truth that you need to bring out. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm a theologian and I think a lot. My husband goes, oh, you're thinking too much. Okay, but at least I got paid for it, right? So anyway, there can be elements of it that would contrast with Christian faith, but that doesn't mean they're bad. It's just that you have to be clear on what your faith is teaching you. But if you're bringing in, mindfulness practices, meditation, spiritual things, physical things like yoga and other things like that, I don't see it necessarily conflicting with being a Christian at the same time.
We have a question from Chris. I'm going to allow her to speak. Go ahead, Chris.
Maybe you're muted.
Chris McQuilkin, did you have a question?
I have a comment, I guess, or sort of a question.
Okay.
I'm not really understanding why we're drawing a line in the sand between religious people and spiritual people, because in my mind, you can't be religious without being spiritual,
Right.
but you can be spiritual without being religious. And I'm not sure why, I just don't see why we're drawing a line there. I don't think anything of people who are spiritual and non-religious, and it sounds like you're considered spiritual without being religious if you just don't attend church. I'm not sure if that's the message you're saying.
No, I just asked people if they self-identified. I didn't have any screen that they behaved in a certain way. I just said, is that what you think of yourself? They said yes. They could be in church, out of church. They could have no religious background. They could have had a lot. All I wanted to know was what they thought, what they believed, if that's how they identified. I don't draw a line in the sand between spiritual and religion. As I said at the beginning of the slideshow, actually they're coterminous. Actually, they're embedded in each other. People that say they're spiritual actually do things that seem religious, and people that are religious always have spirituality in their faith. They go together. It's a false dichotomy. It's an artificial separation. I never think that those two things are apart. But people that let's say yoga. I mean, yoga doesn't seem like religion. It comes from types of religion. It does. But the way we use it in America, we use it for physical purposes, but it has sort of religious echoes, like you dress in a certain way. You maybe bow to a picture in the corner. There's special terms that are used to describe the postures. That's stuff that's similar to what religion does. It's not organized religion, but it acts like it. Maybe religion is bleeding into the culture. What about Alcoholics Anonymous? Alcoholics Anonymous has ritual, it has dogma, it has all those, it has beliefs, it has all those things that organized religion has too. And yet, and it has spiritual practices. So I think it's not that we're wrenching them apart, it's that they were wrenched apart. No, it's that we had secular culture and religious culture, and we tried to keep them apart. But that's artificial. Now, spirituality and even religious practices are bleeding into each other. So I think we're in a transition. I don't think it's going to stay like this. I think we're in a transition period right now.
Thank you. Okay.
I wanted to go back to Clay's question because I think he was really trying to wrestle with our response to other Christians. And I do think that some people who identify as spiritual but not religious expect for us to have a response. Like, what's your response to what these other people are saying? And if you are a spiritual leader, people are certainly looking for you to have a response. And so I just wanted to go back to that question and to dialogue a bit more about that. Like, how do we give the microphone to Christians who have something to say that is like Christ, right? That is challenging some of these norms and ideas and harmful theologies. Because if we don't say anything, they tend to have all of the platform, all of the,
Right.
the whole
Yeah.
conversation. So
Right.
some of us feel very oppressed and just said forget it altogether.
Mhm. Well, part of the reason is that the media, and I used to be a journalist, so I know this, bad stuff sells. Bad stuff gets attention. So if you see something extreme, I was a reporter, a lot of people that had, terrible things happen to them, they made the front page. And the people that were doing good things, they didn't make the front page. That's just the way journalism works. I don't think journalism is bad. I think there's good investigative reporting. And I mean, I loved it. I love being a journalist. But, at the time it was newspapers. And if you want to sell them, you got to have something that's attention catching on the front. But of course, the media is a little different now. But still, do you open up everything that you see? No, you open up the stuff that's more dramatic. So that's one thing. But the second point, that's why more people, that kind gets more attention. The second point is we aren't very good at publicizing ourselves and the things that we are doing well. And some of it's humility, which is okay. But we're not real good at PR, for our own actions. And when we do something like, like I know of a church that there was an Islamic temple that was getting, stuff thrown at it and a lot of prejudice. And so the Christians came from across the street from that church and they stood together with the Muslims. Okay, that made the news. That was dramatic, but it was also Christians doing good things and not being judgmental and hateful towards another religion. So you may have to be a little dramatic if you want to get known, you might have to be a little dramatic. And also maybe we're not doing enough that is good. Are we, are we acting like Jesus taught us to act? Or are we just worried about the budget and, who's mad at who inside the church congregation? And that's a shame. But also I've been among really, really, really progressive and even radical Christians, and I've been among evangelicals, and I've found people that I love in both places and in all the places in the middle. So when we polarize and we blame each other and argue with each other, do you want to join a club where people are fighting with each other? I wouldn't want to join that club. If we both show, hatefulness towards essentially brothers and sisters in Christ. I mean, they may not all act like it, but they say they're Christian. So it doesn't make a good image. And I wouldn't want to join that club either. So why would people want to be part of it if it's like polarized and hateful? That, other people may have other comments on this, and that's fine. You should, speak up. it's a little hard on a webinar. You know, if we were together in a live in an audience, there'd be a lot more comments. I know it's hard this way because I can't see your faces or anything. But I would entertain your thoughts and questions if you want to write to me, and you can see it right back there. My website.
Okay, are there any last questions or comments?
I'll actually jump in. Dr. Linda, I was very struck when you mentioned very quickly as part of your story that you had tried a few different things and Christianity is where you landed. So I'm really curious as to what for you in your personal journey was the distinguishing factor within Christianity and others, among other traditions.
Yeah.
And then was there a particular person or an encounter that deeply contribute to your conversion?
That's I'm very thankful for that question because that is the most important thing in my story. Given that I grew up in a mixed faith, no faith family, my mother was Jewish, my father was Italian Catholic, and they were immigrants. Their families didn't want them to marry because it was after World War II, you know, the Nazi Holocaust. My mother would shiver when she had to go to a Catholic church. She never went to mass, but I mean, if she had to go for a funeral or a wedding, she would just sit real stiffly because when she saw the cross, when she was in a church, she thought of Nazis. That's what she thought. And I was a child and I didn't know, was I Christian? Was I Jewish? Was I nothing? The other kids said I was nothing and I was going to go to hell. So that was kind of dramatic, but it was just hard for me to figure out who I was. And my cousins were either Jewish or Catholic, so I had a lot of religion around me. Okay, so two things happened. First thing that happened that changed my mind a little bit was that my aunt, I had an Italian aunt who saw me being confused and struggling. And now this is going to sound silly, but she really meant well. And she said, you know, Linda, Jesus was Jewish and he became a Catholic. Okay, kind of like a little lopsided theology, but you know what? I didn't know Jesus was Jewish. And when I heard that he was Jewish, I thought, oh, he could understand my situation. And so I kind of reached out to him, or he reached out to me, obviously, because I thought I had no idea that the root of Christianity was Judaism. So I felt more like I could fit in, like I could be a whole person, not two halves. I lived with that for a long time. I went to mass. I kind of enjoyed what I got out of it. But then as a young person, I woke up one day and I was an atheist. It's a long story. It's in the book. And so as an atheist, again, I was spiritually empty and I had no idea what to do. But I decided to go hitchhiking. And I went hitchhiking in Switzerland and I came across, basically it was a Protestant commune. I mean, they looked like hippies, they looked like radicals. They were evangelicals, but I didn't know anything, I couldn't tell. So they said they could tell I wasn't religious. I was a strong feminist, but I was not religious. And they cared about me, which was odd because before nobody cared about my mind and my soul. They might have cared that I looked pretty or, I had to, do the right things as a girl, but that wasn't going to be enough. So anyway, they started talking to me and saying, you're really Jewish because your mother was Jewish. And so you're not even grafted in. You're like an original from Jesus' line. You're original, and we're like adopted, and you were always there. And I never knew that. And the fact that they were Protestant, and then instead of judging me, because when I grew up, everybody judged Jews, everybody judged Catholics, everybody judged immigrants, and that wasn't a good message for me. But when they said, no, you're actually lucky. That's a good thing. And these were Protestants. And instead of being anti-Semitic and judgmental, they were loving and they cared about my mind and my soul. Then I started reading the Bible because before that, I never did. I never bothered with any of that stuff. So they showed me compassion. They respected me. They cared about me. And that's what made the difference. And then I turned to God, or God, finally, God finally got my attention. But it had to come first from compassion and caring and respect. That's what changed it. That's why I'm doing this project. That's why I care.
Wow, thank you so much. That was such a remarkable story. Thank you.
And we have something
Read that.
in the chat. So I greatly appreciate Jonathan. Do you want to speak? You're such a great speaker. Do you want to talk? I don't know which one you're on here twice, but let me see. He says no, he's cool. Okay, so
All right, you can read it.
I greatly appreciate the emphasis on both compassion and listening. In my own context, I have tried to aim over and over that listening is a way of loving, especially in a world where, as you pointed out, people are starving and striving to be heard, to be seen, to be known. But again, we need to embrace the ongoing practice of listening, not just to pastors, not just to deacons, not just to elders. Rather, I believe we need to consistently encourage the art form of active, loving, compassionate listening.
Mhm.
So, just a appreciation and then appreciation for great testimony, and the word compassion seems to pop up continuously. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like any other spiritual but not religious person. All I saw was antagonism and anti this and anti that and judgmentalism. I mean, it's like, who wants to be part of that club? But then when I did go to mass, because my cousins went, and I was very drawn to the gospel and to some of the Bible passages that spoke about God's love. And I started listening to that and not worrying as much about the negative vibes I was getting from other people. And that helped too. But it didn't prevent me from waking up one day as an atheist. And the only thing that really got me finally to know God was the people that should have been negative were actually compassionate. People I expected to be judgmental turned out to be loving. And so SBNRs expect bad things from religious people. So think about that. Are you breaking the stereotype, or are you adding to it? And I'm not trying to judge you all. I'm just trying to say, speaking as a former SBNR, that's what I needed.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Linda, for sharing
Welcome.
your research with us. And we certainly have, we've heard a call to action, and that call to action is compassion. That call to action is active listening and being who Christ taught us to be, to follow the model of Christ in our everyday um, interactions. And also want to say thanks. Someone wants to just say thank you. Very eye opening and very incredibly interesting.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Um, Again, you can reach out to Dr. Linda at healthybeliefs.org. You can purchase her book to read more about her research. I have her book. A few of our church members have her book as well. So we can even start like a reading club and continue this conversation. But our hope is to create a culture at our church that welcomes people no matter where they are on their spiritual journeys, and to really, I mean, I was really challenged, by you encouraging us to help people see where their soul pains are and to speak to that. And that takes a lot of courage, and that takes a lot of insight from our own spiritual journeys and sharing our stories. I think that's also a very vulnerable thing to do, right, with people, sharing our own spiritual journeys that we're still working out ourselves,
Yeah.
too. So I think it's encouraging. So I can't wait to hear all of our stories at FBC of how we came to faith, and I hope that we continue to welcome those in our community who identify as spiritual but not religious. We have another appreciation from Samaria. Hey, girl. Okay.